What's up, MetaNerdz? This video is going to answer the question, how long did it take to build some of the capital ships that we see in Star Wars? We will cover some ships used by the Republic, the Empire, and the Rebel Alliance. By combining what we see in Legends books and other canon material, we can get a really good estimate on the build time of many Star Wars ships. Let's start with some ships produced on Mon Calamari, since those have set timeframes. The Rebel Alliance sourcebook states that the Mon Calamari shipyards were able to produce a Star Cruiser in 6 months. Normal production would have been longer than that, but when running full speed around the clock during the build-up to the Battle of Endor, they were able to pump them out at a rate of 2 a year. We also learned that they could produce a CR-90 or NEBULON-B frigate in about 1 month. That's amazing not just because of how quick it is, but because those aren't even Mon Calamari designs. They're just that versatile. But let's take that Star Cruiser time of 6 months and combine it with some fragments of lore to get an estimate of how long it took to make a Star Destroyer. Starting with the Venator, we have to work backwards from the canon and Legends numbers of the Imperial-class Star Destroyer, being numbered at 25,000 at the Empire's height. Palpatine horrified most of the pacifists in the galaxy with his dramatic increase in militarization following the end of the Clone Wars, so this must have been magnitudes more than what the Republic had. In order to be such a shocking increase, I'd say it couldn't have just doubled, but more like 4 to even 10 times the Republic's navy. The Revenge of the Sith incredible cross-section tells us that over 1,000 Venators defended the Republic's capital during the Battle of Coruscant. Many Venators would have been lost already during these 3 years of fighting, and not all of them would have been recalled to Coruscant, so you have to think that there were at least 3,000 Venators made during the Clone Wars. This would mean the Empire nearly 10x'd the Republic, but honestly I think that if Palpatine just quadrupled the size of the Republic Navy, that would have been shocking enough. So I believe the numbers would have been more around 6,250 Venators. Some were made in secret before the Clone Wars even broke out, but a vast majority of them were built after the Battle of Geonosis. So much so that getting loans from the banking clan to support the war effort became a major plot point in the Clone Wars TV show. So 6,250 produced over 3 years gives us about 2,083 produced a year. Of course, that doesn't let us pin down an exact time frame for a Venator build, but given that Kuat had a shipyard big enough to encircle their planet, and there were places like Corellia, Fondor, and countless space stations, I think it is very possible to have 2,083 individual construction docks. This could mean 1 Venator a year, because remember, our fish folk under an oppressive empire were able to pump out a similarly sized and equipped vessel in only 6 months. So take those numbers how you like. I think 6 months to a year is a reasonable figure for a Venator build. But what about the Imperial Star Destroyer? At its max, there were 25,000 of them over the course of 23 years, so 1,087 per year. The Essential Guide to Warfare pointed out, and the Solo movie confirms it in canon, that the Empire would subcontract Star Destroyers to Corellia Engineering Corporation. The lore states that although most were to be built by Kuat, Palpatine's insatiable appetite for military might could not be met quick enough. The Solo movie opens in 13 BBY, so even after 6 years of rapid expanding, the needs were still not being met by just Kuat. Because 1,087 per year is about half the 2,083 of the Venator, we can make some loose deductions that it took about twice as long, a window of 12 months to 2 years. But we can pin this down a little better by looking at an Imperial Star Destroyer named the Errant Venture. It was the only privately owned Imperial Star Destroyer in the entire galaxy, had a ton of personalized upgrades, and took over a year to finish at the Fondor shipyards. Important for us is that it doesn't say over 2 years or even 2 years to build, so I take this to mean that a standardized ISD that was being mass-produced could not have taken 2 years to build. But I lean towards 6 to 12 months for the Venator and 9 to 15 months for the Imperial 1 class. From here, let's talk about the Super Star Destroyers. Vader's flagship, the Executor, was the place a young Galen Merrick trained and called home, living on the ship while it was still being constructed. But it's also said that Vader received the finished Executor half a year before the Battle of Yavin. This means it took 18.5 years to produce the first Super Star Destroyer. But from the Battle of Yavin up to Hoth, the Empire was able to produce several of them, so in a span of less than 3 years. And the Eclipse and Eclipse 2 would be operational in 4 years, and supposed to be completely finished around 5 years. Both the Executor-class and the Eclipses were more than 10 times the size of an ISD, so this comparably short production time may just reflect the response to the Rebel threat, combined with the economies of scale. And it's not a Star Destroyer, but let's throw in the Death Stars. Death Star 1 is the easiest to figure out. The plans were actually started in 29 BBY, but construction took 19 years. From the end of the Clone Wars in 19 BBY up to year 0 when it was fully operational. But what about the Death Star 2? It technically starts just moments before the Battle of Yavin. Palpatine was so impressed with the performance on Alderaan that in between the time it took Luke to whine about power converters and then swim with a Dianoga, the Emperor had already ordered the production of a second Death Star. Though not finished by 4 ABY, like the Eclipse, it was operational in that time frame and likely to be finished in another year. So in summary, smaller corvettes and frigates are around 1 month, Star Cruisers and Venators around 6 months to a year, ISDs around 9 to 15 months, SSDs around 3 years, Eclipse at 4, and Death Star at 5. A pretty damn efficient empire if you ask me. If you want to connect with us, help support the channel, or pick up some of the reference books used to make these videos, be sure to check out the links in the description. Special shout out to our supporters over on Patreon, but most important of all, remember, Kuat Driveyards is the true ruler of the galaxy, and the Force will be with you, always.